By this point of the story, you guys know the drill. We go to a new island, meet some new characters, and we debate whether or not they'll join the crew as the next official nakama. We did this with Vivi, Polly, Brownbeard, Bon Clay, Rebecca, Carrot, Yamato, and now most recently, Bonney. Bonney is one of my favorite characters out of the list of potential crewmates because she has everything you could ask for in a new member. She has the classic sad backstory. She has a dream that falls in line with the Strawhats, unique powers, and not to mention, but she fills a role in the crew that no one else can. To start things off, let's talk about her role within the Strawhats. At first glance, Bonney seems to be a character that doesn't have any key skills when pit against the rest of the crew. She's not a carpenter, not a helmsman, a chef, a doctor, or even a sharpshooter, which makes sense given the fact that she was a pirate captain not too long ago. She didn't have to fill any of these roles, she kind of just sat around and ate food 24/7, just like Luffy. And that right there is the key, because when you think about what the Straw Hats could use in the scope of the crew, there's no big roles left that need to be filled. I think Yamato was, and still is, a decent fit because she could have filled out the ship's journals and logs just like Odin, which isn't a vital role, but it's still something. But as far as Bonney goes, I think her inexperience and lack of skills is what would make her a great cabin boy, or girl, or pirate apprentice, whichever one suits your fancy. Bonney could simply be a member of the crew that soaks in information from everyone aboard the Thousand Sunny, and most notably, Luffy. In the past few chapters, we've seen that Bonney is able to mimic Luffy's Devil Fruit powers firsthand, with their use of Gear 3rd and most recently, his Gear 5th form. When you think about the future of the series, well after Luffy becomes Pirate King, there should be a character that carries on his legacy and image. The reason I think there should be a character that fills this role is because we have that right now in the current story with Shanks. He was a cabin boy in Roger's crew, and look at him now. Shanks carries a sword that is akin to Roger's and is even able to use his iconic Kamusari attack. If the former Pirate King had a protege, then I believe that the future Pirate King, i.e. Luffy, needs to have one as well. And what better character to fit that role than Bonney, a gluttonous wannabe pirate captain that just so happens to be able to tap into Son God Nika's powers. Another fun tie-in with Roger having Shanks as his cabin boy is that Shanks is a celestial dragon, since he is a part of the Figarland family. Bonney, being a half-celestial dragon cabin girl, would be another great parallel between Roger and Luffy's crew. A weird theory that also gets thrown into the Bonney-Shanks conversation too is that back when Oda drew the supernova as the opposing gender, many have pointed out that male Bonney shares some facial similarities with that of red-haired Shanks. So maybe there's a connection there even, since we do know that her dad exists somewhere within Marie Joie. It might sound like a huge stretch, but I do believe that we should keep an eye on the Figarland family if this ever gets brought up in the future. Another nice parallel Bonney could bring to the table would be with Luffy having Kuma's daughter in his crew, since his father, Dragon, had Kuma a part of his. Jewelry Bonney is legit just a mini version of Luffy in many ways, and it was even shown that she wants to be able to replicate what Luffy can do, as seen when Luffy squares off against Saturn. Bonney aptly asked Luffy to show her how to really throw a punch, and Luffy happily obliged. And then, in this latest chapter, Luffy even encouraged Bonney to use her Nika powers as well. Another thing that connects them really well is the fact that Bonney is a young kid. Luffy's powers as the Sun God all revolve around his boundless imagination. So Bonney actually being a 12-year-old girl works to her advantage, since there's no greater imagination than that of a child's. A fun nod or hint that Bonney was going to have these Sun God Nika abilities would be back in SPS 95, where someone asked Oda what flowers would best represent each supernova. This is where we got the first hint that Luffy might be tied to the Sun God, since Oda said that Luffy's flower would be a sunflower. But as far as Bonnie's flower goes, Oda said that she would be represented by the Freesia, which could suggest her wanting to be, quote, free, like the Sun God. And plus, the chapter in which Bonney first uses her Sun God Nika form is aptly titled, I'm Free. Oda is a bit of a foreshadowing monster. As far as her already being a previously established captain, I don't think that works against her joining the crew, since we've seen Usopp and Jinbei, who are also former captains, join the Straw Hats. And not to mention, but we've also had nakama coming from other pirate crews too, like Robin from Crocodiles, Nami from Arlongs, and Brooke from Yorkies. If anything, Bonney disbanding her pirate crew would be just like Jinbei and Usopp disbanding theirs. Usopp's group was comprised of little kids, so sending them home was probably for the best. Jinbei's group was made up of former Fishman Island citizens who just wanted to make a difference, so them going home also makes sense. And hey, Aladdin just recently got married, so I bet he'd want to settle down too. Bonney's group, just like the formers, was made up entirely of regular Sorbet Kingdom citizens who just wanted to make sure that she was safe. The key here is that none of these pirate crews had actual ambitions other than to help their captains, so there'd be no lingering regret or disdain for the disbandment of their crews. Bonney leaving her crew behind might just be for the best. And not to mention, but Oda did decide to not even drag them over to Egghead Island. They legit got written off into the sunset. One great thing that comes out of Bonney's adventure up until this point would be her bounty. The Straw Hat bounties are stacked in such a way where it somewhat distinguishes hierarchy. Not exactly true since Luffy doesn't see it this way, and since we do have some wacky ones like Usopp's monstrous 500 million and Chopper's weird 1000 berry bounty, but we do have some that follow a scheme, like Frankie's 394, Brooke's 383, and Nami's 366. The reason I'm bringing up bounties is because I believe Bonney's bounty perfectly fits within the Straw Hats since she currently has a bounty of 322 million, which would make her the lowest bounty of the group, outside of Chopper's gag of course, and that would befit her role as the cabin girl of the crew, a bounty that isn't too low and a bounty that doesn't supersede any of the other crewmates. When it comes to the general requirements of what it takes to become a nakama, in Luffy's and the fan base's eyes, there are some strange ones, like the fact that Luffy needs to be able to call you by your actual name and not just a goofy nickname. It sounds absurd, but that is one of the main reasons why people didn't think Yamato would join the crew, because for the longest time, he called her Yamabro, and then, when he did come around to calling her Yamato, he actually extended an invitation to join the crew. For Bonney, this was a gag that didn't last long. When we first arrived on Egghead, Luffy was up to his usual shenanigans and called her Bogey, but he quickly tried to correct himself before Bonney noticed to no avail. This was actually such a key moment that Oda even commented on this scene in SBS 107, where he says that Luffy felt so awkward about this mistake since he just learned about Kuma's fate, and he felt bad about her situation, and that it was a mistake that Luffy will never make again. A few more reasons why Bonney would make a great crewmate would be because of how useful she could be when it comes to the future fights in the series. Not only can she absolutely destroy people by using some of Luffy's iconic attacks and gear fit abilities, but she can even work as a great synergist for the Straw Hats. Bonney's power not only allows her to alter her timeline, but the timelines of those around her as well. So who's to say that she can't age Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and the rest of the crew into their prime fighting forms, timelines, and ages? We've seen throughout the SBS's Oda's depiction of all of the Straw Hat crew at their key ages and timelines. What if that was a hint all along that Bonney was going to bring those into the canon story? Just imagine an older Pirate King version of Luffy in the final war. And this isn't that crazy of an idea either, since this wouldn't be the first time in the final saga where Oda would have brought in an SBS drawing into the canon manga. A few great examples would be Oda hinting at the design of Shimotsuki Kozuburo being the creator of Zoro's swords in SBS 92. Oda drew the warlords all as kids and later brought those designs back in as the Seraphim in SBS 63. And then there's Female Law, which first debuted in SBS 76. So yeah, having all the Straw Hats in their good timeline forms that we saw throughout all the SBSs could actually happen and does have precedence. The best part of this is that Bonney wouldn't have to exert her powers that much to do this either, since this is the most basic ability she has. She's already been shown to do this, since in chapter 1064, she was able to age Luffy into an older, possible future of himself to hide from the Kuma police bot. So now, for the more insane variant of Bonney's power, but what if she is able to awaken her powers and grant the Sun God Nika form to multiple allies all at once. She has already shown that she can contort a person's timeline, so if trained up, there does exist a chance that she can turn all the Straw Hats and Grand Fleet even into Sun God Nika monsters. I like to imagine this to be like how Naruto was able to share his 9 tails chakra with the entire battlefield in the final war. I think the best and most ironic part about Bonney joining the Straw Hats and tapping into Sun God Nika's powers is that she was granted these abilities by Saint Saturn of the Gorosei. So in a way, they created their own nightmare by experimenting on Bonney's mother. And hey, if Sun God Nika versions of every character allied with us are too broken for your taste, then she could even turn them into giants, or buccaneers, since those fall within her jurisdiction of potential timelines. Bonney might just be one of the most powerful characters in the future if she is properly trained up. I mean, hell, most of the cabin boys we have seen throughout the series have all turned out to be absolute monsters years later. Like Kobe with Alvida and Garp, Shanks and Buggy with Roger, and Blackbeard with the Whitebeard Pirates as prime examples. So Bonney having this potential as Luffy's cabin girl makes a lot of sense. Another key power that she could bring to the table for the Straw Hats would be her ability to control the Pacifista. While the Pacifista are definitely not a problem for our newly dubbed Yonko crew, they still are a pain to deal with at the end of the day. So by bringing Bonney aboard, we could simply nullify a great deal of the Navy's threat to us in the process. Not to mention, but all the Straw Hats have acknowledged that they owe Kuma a great debt for what he has done for them in the past. So disabling the Pacifista, rather than destroying them, would be in their best interest. At this point of the story, I doubt any of the Straw Hats would be willing to let Bonney fall into harm's way. So what better way to keep her safe and to repay Kuma's debt than to take her underneath their flag. One aspect of Bonney joining, which I haven't touched on yet, is Bonney's willingness to join the crew. This desire is what stopped Yamato from joining back at Wano. Yamato, Kinemon, and Momonosuke didn't take up Luffy's offer to board the ship because they were needed elsewhere. Kinemon and Momonosuke have a country to rule. Yamato wanted to start her journey just like how Oden did, by making the rounds around Wano first. Unlike the aforementioned, Bonney has nothing stopping her from joining the crew. She can't go back to Sorbet Kingdom because she's a wanted criminal that can control Pacifista, and plus, her crew and ship are currently missing in action. She has nowhere to go. Tie that together with the fact that her dream and main reason for setting sail in the first place was to simply find Sun God Nika and her father. Now that she's found the men that she's been looking for, why would she go anywhere else other than here? Not to mention, but her dad vehemently believed that one day, Sun God Nika would free her and the entire world. This would be something that she would want to see with her very own eyes, the miracle that her father believed in. I personally don't think there are any good reasons why she would part ways with the Straw Hat crew after we leave Egghead Island. So now, as far as why I believe there's going to be another crewmate for the Straw Hats, it really just goes back to the very beginning of One Piece, where Luffy openly declared that he wanted 10 crewmates. If you don't include Luffy, there are currently 9 members of the Straw Hat gang, so that last spot is still open, and the last people who he extended an offer to turned him down. Well, they didn't turn him down outright, they simply didn't want to set sail with him. Kind of like how Vivi is a Straw Hat, but also not one at the same time. I want to call this the Straw Hat Nakama Alliance Gray Zone. Bonney could be the one to finally board the crew as the final member of the Straw Hats. I know that there is some contention when it comes to Luffy including himself in the 10 crewmate line or not, but how I view it is in comparison to Blackbeard and Shanks' crews, where they both have 10 key members of their crews, not including themselves. Because of them, I do believe that Luffy's crew will also meet that 10 crewmate quota. Another potential goofy hint that Bonney could be joining the crew could even be seen back in chapter 1091's color spread, where the Straw Hat crew are chowing down on a margarita pizza, which also just so happens to be Bonney's favorite as stated in SBS 81, and we've seen her eating that exact same pizza throughout the entire series as well. If Bonney does end up joining us, she could even help propel us onto the next major focus of the story, Blackbeard. So now that Blackbeard has Garp held hostage, there is a chance that Luffy would want to finally take down the madmen. If this happens to be Luffy's mindset, then Bonney could provide a great wealth of information in terms of what Blackbeard is capable of, since she was defeated by Blackbeard early on, post-time skip. Blackbeard's true abilities have been shrouded in mystery, with all of his fights being off-screened at the very end. It's the same song and dance. Blackbeard fights someone, he gets heavily injured, we cut away, and when we come back, Blackbeard is declared the victor. Bonney could help us finally fill in the gaps as to how Blackbeard truly fights, and what hidden powers he might even have. So now, spinning this in the opposite direction, even if Luffy restrains himself and doesn't run off to save his grandpa from Blackbeard, Bonney would still be a wealth of information since she has been to Marie Joie before and has even snuck into Pangaea Castle. So, if we were to ever attack the Gorosei, Holy Knights, and Emu in their home turf, we wouldn't be going in blind, thanks to Bonney. Lastly, as far as what our dreams now would be, it could be something as simple as sailing with Luffy, the Sun God, or maybe even helping him find the One Piece. If Bonney ends up being more of the vengeful type, then maybe it would even be to take down the world government and to get revenge on Saint Saturn for what he did to Kuma and her mom. Hell, speaking of dreams, even going back to when she was younger, she wanted to visit all the places that her father told her about through books and personal adventures. So maybe she'll have a wholesome and simple dream, such as that. Bonney meeting Luffy here on Agate Island feels too good to be true. And like Vegapunk told her, maybe this meeting was always fated to happen.